We just got back from trick-or-treating and my husband dared me to wear these for the video, but I can't really see anything. Hello y'all, welcome back to Case Can Probably Read. My name is Casey and I probably can. Today, I'm going to give you a rundown of all the books that I finished in October and what I thought about them. So without further ado, let us begin. I finally finished the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series by Rick Riordan. I started this series in 2017. A few things have happened since then. I've been busy. I read the first book, The Sword of Summer, in 2017, and I started The Hammer of Thor, but I didn't finish it at the time. I've occasionally thought about picking this book back up through the years, but I just never found a great reason to until last month when not one, but two of my students mentioned they were reading these books and said that I should finish them. I had to basically restart The Hammer of Thor because I couldn't remember what was going on, but I did finish it and I went straight into book 3, The Ship of the Dead. These are cool books. I finished at least 2 of Riordan's other mythology series and I like the voice he writes in for these stories. It's engaging and it makes for easy reading that you don't have to slog through, which is one reason I imagine middle graders take to it so well. Personally, I also really appreciate the way Riordan doesn't shy away from social issues, even at this age level. He finds a way to introduce homeless characters, Muslim characters, trans characters in a way that showcases their personhood and humanity. I'm sure there are some diehard Norse mythology folks who wouldn't endorse Riordan's portrayal of certain Norse deities. I have no dog in that fight. That's not why I showed up. The only real beef I have with the books is that I don't like the way the characters talk to each other. There were times when the humor in the books leaned a little too heavily on how many different ways the characters could think of to call each other stupid. I noticed this in the Percy Jackson books as well, especially between him and Annabeth, and again with Magnus and Alex in these books. Alex and Annabeth are often downright rude to Magnus and Percy. They call these boys stupid a lot. As a person who has taught middle schoolers, one of my main goals is to teach kids how to speak to each other with respect, even when they're teasing or playing around. It's not funny to be constantly insulting your friend's intelligence. Don't do it, kids. I also read The Last Graduate, which is the second book in Naomi Novik's Shalomance series. If you watched my last video, I don't need to tell you how I feel about Naomi Novik. The Last Graduate was released on September 28th of this year. I normally am not a get a book as soon as it comes out kind of gal, but I really wanted to find out what happened after the cliffhanger at the end of A Deadly Education, which was the first book in the series. Let me tell you, if that was a cliffhanger, then The Last Graduate is a one-finger dangle over an eternal abyss. I regret reading it so soon. I still loved this book. There was more awesome magic, more crazy and dangerous creatures, more characters finding a place to belong where they had never had one before. Everything I signed up for when I picked up this book. But the end! When I finished this book, I spent 10 minutes angrily searching the back pages for a chapter that I had somehow missed. I did not find one. Then I frantically searched Google and Goodreads to determine that yes, there is an as of yet untitled third book in the Shalomance series that is scheduled to be released sometime in 2022. At this point, I am unsure if that third book will be the reason that I make it through 2021 or the reason that I don't. That is why I wish I had waited at least a couple of months before I read this book so I didn't have to wait as long. But what's done is done, and now I have to live with the consequences. After that ordeal, I read Tahira in Bloom by Farah Heron. This isn't the type of book I normally just pick up, but it was one of the free early release books I got to pick through the Amazon First Reads program. It's a contemporary young adult romance that's scheduled to be released this month, November. The protagonist of this book is a 17-year-old girl named Tahira, who is an aspiring fashion designer with her future all planned out. Unfortunately, the summer internship she has lined up for herself is canceled, and instead she finds herself working at her aunt's boutique in a tiny rural Canadian town for the summer. This town hosts a big floral design competition every year, and due to some happenings and shenanigans, Tahira finds herself entering the competition with a boy who lives next door to her aunt. The boy is rude and arrogant at first, and he and Tahira do not get along, but more shenanigans occur and they start to get warm, fuzzy feelings for one another. To be honest, I don't have much to say about this book. There were some funny lines, and I learned a few things I didn't know about floral arrangement and fashion design. And I think that for what it is, it's probably actually not a bad book. It's just not the sort of thing I normally read, so I feel ill-qualified to make a judgment call on its quality. I didn't love it or care about it that much, but that doesn't mean that no one else will. The next book I finished was The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Beth Allison Barr. I've already talked about this book a couple of times, so I don't want to try to stumble through another long-winded explanation. So briefly, it's one historian's findings on why the thing conservative Christians call biblical womanhood isn't biblical. If I could give you one quote from the book that could help you wrap your head around what it presents, it would be this. What if we followed the example of Jesus, who let Mary of Bethany sit at his feet like a male disciple, and who overruled his disciples to make sure he heard the words of the woman of Canaan? What if we realized that, even when the male disciples pushed women away, Jesus always listened to women speak? Complementarianism is patriarchy, and patriarchy is about power. Neither have ever been about Jesus. For those who weren't raised in conservative Christianity, it may be easy to simply reject any theology that bars women from leadership or teaches them to be submissive to male authority in every aspect of their lives. Unfortunately, for people who are raised in these communities, everything reinforces these teachings, from the way they choose to examine or not examine church history to the way they're taught to interpret the Bible. It's a way of life, and any decision to question it is considered a rebellion against God's word and his perfect plan for the lives of believers. This book is the first one I've read that makes a convincing case that theology that teaches biblical womanhood is incorrect. Finally, I read The Roommate, a romance novel by Rosie Danan. This book is a huge departure from what I consider my normal reading material. But after I finished The Making of Biblical Womanhood, I really wanted to read something unique and outlandish and not at all scholarly, and this definitely fit the bill. The Roommate is about a socialite named Clara Wheaton, who is from a prominent and wealthy East Coast family who drops everything in her respectable life to move to Los Angeles when her childhood crush asks her to move in with him. When she arrives at her new home, however, she finds that her crush is leaving for the summer and has instead rented his room to a guy named Josh. So now Clara will be rooming with Josh for the summer, and she's about to find out that he has an interesting career in the adult entertainment industry. I'm not trying to give any spoilers, but the blanks are there. Fill them in. The story of how I ended up finding this book to read is long and boring, and I'm now going to tell it to you in detail. Weirdly, I started reading a lot of contemporary romance novels in September and October. Contemporary romance has never really been my jam, and by now you hopefully know that I prefer my fiction to have magic in it. But I fell down this rabbit hole of romance novels. I do know how it started, and I might make a separate video about that and the books I read because of it, but that's not part of this story. Anyhow, like I said, after I finished Biblical Womanhood, I wanted a fun, trashy read to recover, and I remembered watching a monthly wrap-up video from Mara at Books Like Whoa earlier this year where she mentioned reading The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan. From what I remember of Mara's review of that book, I thought it sounded perfect for my purposes, so I went Googling to find out where I could read it. I discovered that The Intimacy Experiment was actually the second book in the Shameless series by Rosie Danan. Now, unlike some of you heathens out there, I find it physically impossible to start a series on any book that is not the first book. I know that in a lot of romance series, individual books still often function more as standalones, even though characters and events sometimes overlap. But I am as God made me, and I had to begin at the beginning. I did enjoy this book. Again, much like Tahira and Bloom, I don't feel like I have enough experience with this genre to deliver a meaningful criticism, but it suited my purposes perfectly. And surprisingly, I feel like I learned some things. I know very little about the adult entertainment industry, and I've never really thought about what life would look like from the perspective of someone who works in it. And this actually developed some empathy in me for that point of view. Besides that, there was some fun dialogue and the characters were interesting and it was a fun read. I have no idea when, but I do think I'd like to finish the second book in this series eventually. Well, there you have it, my October wrap up. I'm still not sure how my November will shape up. I have a lot of interesting books sitting unread in my Kindle library, plus several on my shelves that I need to crack open. And I'm actually kind of spoiled for choice right now, so I'll just see what I feel like reading and go from there. But that's where I'll end today's video. If you have any book recommendations for me, please leave it for me in a comment. As always, if my brand of awkward appeals to you, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, read just because you can. Bye!